to the UIAAA Connection podcast. GoFan and VNN are proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection. Now a combined company, GoFan and VNN provide a seamless integration for digital ticketing and athletic websites. Direct your fans to one place for all your athletic events, communications, and tickets to home and away games. Thank you to GoFan and VNN for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have as our special guest recently retired head coach of the Weber State Wildcats softball team, Mary Kay Amicone. Welcome to the podcast, Punk.
Thank you very much for having me, Hutch.
All right, let's have you begin. We normally go with the where you grew up, etc. We'll make that the second question. Let's talk for a minute about a big deal in your life, a recent development. By the time this airs, it'll be a week old, but as we talk, it's only days old. Tuesday night or Monday night, I believe it was, your induction into the Utah Sports Hall of Fame. That is a big deal. So talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, it's still pretty surreal. I'm in recovery mode a couple of days later, but it's quite an honor. And the class of 2025 was phenomenal. So I'm thrilled to be a part of this new team.
And tell me, what was it like to have the youngest Tony Cone there, along with your boys, obviously Trevor and Derek, and of course Mark, your daughter-in-law, etc. Talk about that for a minute, because that's the first time I've met him. What a cute kid.
Yeah, thanks. It was very special. It's hard to look into the future with the way things go, and basically it's hard for us to be on the same stage together, and they're definitely a part of my life and a part of everything we do. So it was very special to have them be together with me.
All right, let's have you, I know most of this, but our listeners do not. Let's have you talk about where you grew up, your youth days playing in sports, where you went to college, your first job, etc.
Yes, I grew up in Southern California in the Anaheim area, and I played all of the things outside. As people of my generation, we played a lot of street games, a lot of night games, a lot of over the line back in the day with baseball, because there were a bunch of boys that I was best friends with, and I was certainly at the time, quote, a tomboy. I found a lot of fun in playing sports. And then one of the unique things was that in California at the time, we had an after-school sports program, and it was run through the school, and we could go straight after school. We'd just stay at school, and we would learn all sorts of sports. I played field hockey, flag football. They just taught us everything, and it was a great way to get us engaged and pretty much probably stay out of trouble during that time. But that really helped me just gain confidence in how much sport was fun and let me just develop.
Now let's put this in perspective. This is pre-1972, so this is pre-Title IX.
Yes, it was. We moved to Utah in 1970, and so it was definitely none of my. I really can't remember any girlfriends because it just wasn't happening, And I had two brothers, and my older brother was very much impactful in me just playing sports and picking up with him. And he didn't really love the fact that I was on his team. So we always were on opposite teams, which was fine with me as long as I got to play. So there weren't very many females involved in sport.
Certainly. Let's have you talk for a minute about the mentors and leaders in your life that have made a difference to you way back in the 60s and 70s and later on in life.
My mom was definitely my mentor. She um, started me out playing. At the time it was um, bonnet ball, I want to say. Whatever it was, we got started at age 8, and she coached me for part of that. And then as we my sixth grade teacher's always been my favorite teacher. She was just so empowering. She really believed in us as young people and got me kind of on my destination for teaching. But then when we moved to Utah, it was pretty challenging because I was a Southern California kid who played outside with the boys, and all of a sudden we show up in 1970 and the snow begins to fall, and I'm kind of a lost soul at that point because the ages were pretty tough. I was going into 7th grade at Hillcrest Junior High School, and my brother was going into the 9th grade. And I think my younger brother, Tony, got off pretty easily because he was only going into the 4th grade.
Hmm.
So I I was very fortunate that during my junior high years, I pretty much stayed out of trouble, because there just wasn't a lot of connection. No friends to start because we had just moved into a new neighborhood. My mom's father, my grandpa, lived here in Holiday, Utah, and that's what created the move, was for them to have a connection with our family. So it was pretty challenging, to say the least.
Let's have you speak for a minute about your mom. I'm familiar with the story, but talk about your mother and the softball team she played with.
So my mom played major softball. It was kind of a semi-pro league that was across the United States, and she played for the Orange Lionettes, which were comparable to the Utah Shamrocks.
Hmm.
And it was phenomenal looking back on how they organized, and um, I got to see pretty much people that I wanted to be like, which was unique, because I was an 8-year-old girl playing bonnet ball, and I really didn't see many people wanting to do the same thing that I was doing. So every opportunity I had to go to Hart Park and to play to watch them play, I saw that this was possible. I didn't know how at the time, of course, but it was great. And my mom set the tone for that, and has always been a big support to my coaching and teaching career, as she helped me travel in my coaching opportunities. And so she was the first big time mentor and role model.
Perfect. Let's have you talk for a minute, kind of a personal question. Punk, what's your biggest failure or disappointment in life, and what did you learn from it?
I have never really been hung up on the verbiage of failure. It To
Hmm.
me, I learned early on that it was a temporary setback, and I think especially when you listen to any of the Hall of Famers that just went in, I heard their stories, and all of us had uh, temporary setbacks, and it makes you who you are. I think probably one of the greatest learning points for me was, um, aside from personal personal tragedy that I lost loved
Sure.
ones, was moving on from a BYU job that I had taken and started the program there. And it started so quickly that we had no field, we had no equipment. It started as the varsity sport, and I got hired, and that was essentially my first head coaching position. And it taught me a lot about loyalty and coaching and how to start programs, because that was certainly a huge challenge. We played in Provo City Park. Fortunately, I recruited some very good junior college players who had always wanted to play Division I softball. And so when we started the program, it was a lot of work, and it was uniquely a time when BYU had two athletic directors, a male athletic director and a female athletic director. And I didn't know at the time how important that was, and that administration, how important administration needed to be with as a coach, my particular goals of taking over as a coach and having the support that it takes. And that first year, it's really pretty unbelievable to make a schedule in 3 months for a Division I program, add uniforms, equipment, players, coaches. And so it taught me a great deal. And then in my second year, we were Mountain West Conference champions, and we had a lot of success with players that were very much like me, pretty feisty and wanted to achieve excellence. And then in my third year, we hit the bumpy road of coaches not aligning with what I believed in, and the administration, the current women's administrator, pulled me in and said, we're gonna go another direction. And after that success, it was just very hard to believe what was happening at the time. And then, I just moved on, and I look back at those years as I've reflected recently in my retirement, and how much the importance of moving forward from that, how much that taught me about the importance of people in your corner. Just like you, Hutch, I've had many people that have helped support me, and you have to pick yourself up. You're definitely down for the count, if you will, and you have to sort through what's most important to you, and where am I going to go from here, and what is this going to teach me. And so that setback really forged my future career.
Thank you for sharing that. I know that was a tougher time, and since you've mentioned that, then let's get into the question of all of the different places that you've been a coach. So you've already talked about the 3 years at BYU, so pick it up from there for our listeners and let them know the different places, softball and baseball, that you've coached.
Yes, I had opportunities. We have two sons who they were starting to play baseball. So Mark is he's a legend at the University of Utah. He was a very good baseball player. And we played a lot of fast pitch softball, a lot of slow pitch softball together. We had leagues that we played on until, basically Trevor was born, and he was coming to the ballpark with us. But I was able to start coaching a comp team with Larry Wilson, and it was called the Utah Bullets. And they came to me when I was teaching elementary school in the summers, and Derek and Trevor weren't old enough to play baseball. So I started coaching with Larry, and it greatly affected my life. And I coached them from 12 to 14 to 16 to 18. And then I had the great fortune of coaching them at the University of Utah. So I assisted with the University of Utah. I assisted with Joe Evans and Michelle Townsend, and Fern Gardner was the athletic director there. And so I was a part-time coach, and then I went on to coach part-time with Mona Stevens at the University of Utah. And as I mentioned Monday night, I really learned that being an assistant coach is vital to a program. And honestly, how much fun it is to be the assistant, because you get to do all the fun things with your athletes. And I didn't have to be the heavy, which is wow. I didn't even realize that, because I was the assistant for Larry Wilson and I was the assistant for Joe, and I got to see how things worked, but I also that taught me a lot about assistant coaching. And then from there, it kind of gets a blur. I was coaching when Trevor and Derek were growing up. They were 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds, all of that. And Mark and I helped coach their baseball teams. And then when Mark was very busy with the University of Utah as an associate athletic director. And so I just pretty much got used to it was me and the boys, and he would be there when he could. And so I was coaching him all the time. I knew how to throw pretty accurate batting practice. And so I just, I coached them, and I didn't think twice about it, and never really thought anybody was out there judging me on my coaching abilities at that point, because I had confidence in them, and I had built confidence in these young men. So from there, I did have the Division I opportunities. And when I changed careers from the BYU loss of a job, I was pretty devastated personally with family loss and with just the whole thought process of, why am I doing this? Why did I invest so much time and sacrifice and heartache in such a job just to be dismissed in a whim? So I went through the hiring process at an elementary school, got back to my roots, and I took a job. And I don't know if you remember this, Hutch, but I took a job as I was hired by the Jordan district to be a 6th grade teacher in the Lowell. And I got back on that education horse, and, I was ready to lock in and stay there. And then you came to me with a Jordan High opportunity that was completely unexpected. And you laid it out in such a way, along with Marilyn Richards, and said, this is where we're at, and we know you can do this. And I said, well, I probably know I can do it too, but I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. And then you laid out the kind of the time frame of, all right, your boys are coming into Jordan, and we need you to do something here that you're capable of doing. And when it got down to it, I thought, okay, you're right. I need to do it. So from then, I told the principal of the elementary school that I'm so sorry to drop this, but I've got an opportunity I really need to take. So you roped me in to teaching high school health and aerobics, if that wasn't just step aerobics. And then, of course, health to your own baseball guys. That was a unique experience. And then, I was able to hire great assistants. And in my experience with BYU, those assistants made all the difference in the world. And as I mentioned, the administration was in my corner, and it was a tough corner to be in because of the ramifications of there weren't any women coaching baseball at the time, and
Ever, not at the time, ever.
ever. And so you and Marilyn were definitely in my corner. Mark was in my corner, and I hired Mark Clevin, who is an excellent coach and had played at the University of Utah. And I hired Chad Grundy, which was a phenomenal coach. And I had known him from coaching days at Bingham High School with Rand Rasmussen. So that's a whole different area of time. But they were vital to the success of the program. And so we started from the ground, basically. I learned how to order buses, how to have a field day, how to set up the field, and how to change a culture. And that was big. And I did lean on my days at being at BYU. I pretty much had to start my own culture at BYU. And I didn't know what that would be, but I knew it involved a lot of dedication and discipline and accountability. And so that time frame was unique because I saw men coaching girls in every level of softball, and they were guys that were former college baseball players, and they came on, and they were accepted into the landscape of Division I softball. And I had success at Division I softball, so I wasn't worried about a little baseball. I knew how to take a lead. I knew the benefits of baseball, base running, and all the things that you learn fundamentally. They weren't that far off from softball. In fact, they had a lot of things that were more fun. In softball, you have to wait till the ball leaves the pitcher's hand before you can take off and steal.
Right.
In baseball, it was so fun to just be able to steal bases and pick off, and the field is so big that you had time to make decisions. So uniquely, that time was winning over the guys that had a different coach, and that was a challenge in itself. And it was a challenge, I think, for the community, even though I remember sitting down in the room at Jordan High with Marilyn and folks that were a part of the hiring process. And they said, yeah, we'll support you. We think this is great. This is going to be great. And then, of course, it becomes more challenging because, as anyone knows, players only like you when they're playing, as the song lyrics say. They're not everybody can play, including your own family. It's always merit based with me, and if you could play and you followed the rules and you had discipline in what you were doing and you represented us well, then I was the coach for you. But that was definitely changing a culture, and then to see the community and the awareness of men not having an opportunity to see a female coach in that space of baseball, that was pretty jarring. That was pretty eye-opening.
Let me add a follow-up question to this, and I am kind of approaching this from my end because people came to me, and as you know, before we hired you, I'd spent 10 years as the women's basketball coach, and I'd umpired women's softball fast and slow for years. So people just said, "Oh, this is so great for women," and Hutch, we're glad that you've done this. And I never thought of it that way. When I spoke with Marilyn, I said, "Look, she's the best coach, so let's just hire her." And people I know there was newspaper articles. People just made it this big, I am woman, hear me roar. And maybe it is from the female point of view, but it was never that way with me. It was, she's the best coach that we're interviewing. What's the big deal? And I know, and you've mentioned a few things, it's got to be different from your end. And I'm sure people may have been saying the same things to you. Oh, yeah, good job. You're the first female coach, et cetera, et cetera. But talk about that a little bit more about that cultural aspect because it was never about, oh, we're going to show the world that we're groundbreakers. That it wasn't that to me, but I think it may have been for some people in the public. So maybe talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, I appreciate that because that's exactly what I mean with merit-based. I didn't think about it from, like you said, it was, I know I can teach, and that's what coaching is. And at the time, it never crossed my mind that I was building a bridge for women. And as you mentioned, uh, hear me roar. Mm-mm. It wasn't in my thought process at all that I was running through the door for the first female baseball coach or whatever. And I know the cliche about first one through the door gets the bloody nose. I was doing what I knew I was capable of doing, and I felt like I could make a contribution that was required at the time because there was a sudden coaching change at Jordan, and I felt like, um, you know, I knew that you and Marilyn believed in me, and I wasn't really aware of the gender issues until, of course, you hit a bumpy road, and then people want to bring out things that you're like, no, that that never occurred to me. Where the
Yeah.
rules are this, and if you go on spring break, and if you go out the hotel window, as it happened, we have rules, we have guidelines, then you're not going to play the next day. You're not going to play. And the people that didn't go out the window and whatever, all the coaches that I coached with, they were on board going, no, this is not happening, and this is not the way we're starting this program. And so it was vital for me to have Mark Clevin and Chad Grundy going, okay, this is the way we roll. And that said a lot about the future of Jordan High baseball. And, you know, I credit that first class. It was bumpy for them. It was challenging for
Hmm.
them because they didn't necessarily want to be in that situation where they had the first female head coach. But once you're on the field, you earn their respect by your coaching. And it took us a little bit of time, but they finally got the fire in their belly that, forget you guys, that Alta High School and Brighton High School, who make an issue of this being a gender thing. And they started to play better. They started to dig in for each other. They recognized hitting hitting our players was something that, why are you doing that? It didn't make sense. And I think one of the coolest stories I had was in that first year. Um, we went to a 3-game series in high school for one of the first times, and
Hmm.
we Alta was very good, and Jordan and Alta always had a big rivalry. Brighton was pretty good, but Jordan, Alta, right by each side. And we were towards the second, maybe the last couple series, and Alta was I think leading the league in win loss. And we went over to Alta, and we got there early, and our guys had their routines. We would run to the fence, we would circle stretch out in right field. And all of a sudden, Alta, their players come over and they run through our stretching circle to touch the right field fence. And now we got a problem. Now our guys are like, heck no. You can imagine. And so, there aren't any umpires there. So Clevin and Grundy and I, we go out there and we're like, get out of here. What are you doing? And we stop a fist fight from happening, but that was the fire that was lit. And we beat them. And it was straight up, we beat them because you don't poke the bear. And the team was the bear. They'd had enough.
Yeah.
They'd had enough of people going, you're not that good, and da 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 da. But we were that good. Again, your foundation is your culture. And I was so proud of our guys because, they figured it out that it was merit based and that you were expected to do certain things. And as I mentioned, your jersey that you wear, you need to leave it in a better place. And we did that at Jordan. We did. And we went on, to have great athletes at Jordan High School baseball. And that came because of those trials that existed in the first year. And we had a great class of younger kids. And at that point, Trevor was a junior. He was a sophomore and a junior at Jordan High School. And Derek was, like 8th grade, 9th grade. And I had a heart-to-heart with Trevor when the Salt Lake Community College job opened up. And, he said, you've done your job. We're in a good space. And I know that softball is your future. So I think it would be great if you want to do it. And I really, at that point, I was like, ouch, not from him, but just from the investment. Just like the same feeling I had at BYU, you put every ounce of effort into that move. And then I was very much at peace with who was hired, and the guys were going to take care of each other. And I had done my part, and it was time for me to move on for Trevor and Derek. And that was so fun to watch that happen. They finished second with Trevor, and then they won the state championship when Derek was a junior, and Garrett Nash and Jonesy. It was a phenomenal part of my life.
And all kids that were pretty much youngsters that you had a chance to coach. So that's awesome. So let's continue this journey now with the last 2 spots, but the last 2 places you coached is probably 2 decades or longer. So then let's get to Slick, and then let's get to Weber State.
Okay, so I took the job at Salt Lake Community College. Amy Hogue had been the coach there, and she left the program in a good situation. Norma Carr was the athletic director, and Norma was my she was my University of Utah coach, and she wanted to hire me. And I just saw her yesterday again, and she said, you really didn't want that job at Salt Lake. And I said, well, it wasn't that I didn't want it. It was that I had the program that I was invested in going the right direction, and now I was going to need to change again. And she said, oh, I thought you'd just want to play for me or work for me. And I laughed and I said, well, of course I did, but it's still a huge change. And then I saw the value in the different aspect of a junior college position. I was very able to focus on our family and to watch Trevor play and to watch Derek play, because recruiting was different for a junior college. You weren't on the road all the time. You could get great athletes in the state of Utah and a little bit in like Nevada, they came. But I was free to do the things that I loved, which was basically I missed a few games, but which was my priority was to watch them play, Derek and Trevor. And so when I took that job, it was left in a good position, and we went on to, and I was there 9, 10 years. It gets foggy, but in that time frame, we went to the national championship junior college tournament multiple times, and I had a great time with families and players, and I loved my time at Salt Lake Community College. We had a lot of talent. We had a lot of family support. And then finally, we had made it to the junior college national championship many times. And the last time was in 2013, and we finished runners up. We had our shot to be national champions. And last inning, some things happened, and we lost the championship game, and then Jerry Bovey, as you know, Jerry Bovey, a good friend, Jerry called and said, "Hey, we're going to make a coaching change, and we want you to come to Weber State." And I said, "No, I don't want to go anywhere right now." I was still devastated from the loss. And then he said, "Well, okay, let's just meet." And then, like a recruiting visit, let's take you on a visit. And so I had basically reached every challenge at Salt Lake Community College, and Derek and Trevor were both done with high school baseball. So I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to make a move back to a 4-year institution, now would be the only time that I did it. And it actually happened when Utah Valley had a coaching position open too, and Weber State had a coaching position. So I entertained a call from Utah Valley, and then I went on a visit to Weber State, and it everything about it was right. The timing was right. The administration was right. And it's a funny story because Macaulay Flint was a dominant pitcher in the state of Utah, and she had played for me at Salt Lake, and she had signed to go to Weber State before I even knew that I was going. And so she says that, and she's very funny. She said, "Well, you only came because I came here first." And I said, "Yeah, you got that right. As a Flint, you got that right." And so, again, I went to the pathway at Weber State. I got some great junior college kids. The current players from Weber State, they didn't know how to win yet. They had started a program, and Tina Johnson was the coach. And so I was called upon to do what I had done before, and that was to basically have a culture shift. And the kids that were in the program, I say kids, they're the young people that were in
Right.
the program, were all about it. They just wanted to win, and they wanted to be coached. And I will say, because I got a little bit ahead of myself, at Salt Lake Community College, one of the greatest decisions I ever made was to be a part of a team teaching opportunity, a leadership class that they offered, called No Greater Heroes. And in doing so, that class met every Tuesday and Thursday, and I got to meet one of my great mentors, Derek Waddups. And we coached that class together essentially the whole time we were there, because he then took another job as well. But it reframed my perspective. It helped me to understand that these young people, they had a lot of choices to make, and they had a lot of things that they were dealing with. And it changed my life, because personally, I was getting, as I mentioned, off the mat of the loss of many loved ones, and it helped me recenter myself. And so kudos to them for still having that program. They still do it, and it goes around teaching elementary school kids and the athletes at Salt Lake Community College are a part of it. And it really helped me because I took those basic fundamentals and I threaded them through the culture at Weber State.
Sure. And if I might add, you used those principles for a few years at the UIAAA Dare to Lead conference, the state conference, where once again you and I got connected because I was involved in that. But that was a great thing. Let me ask you about what would you say a common myth about coaching is that you'd like to debunk to the general public?
Oh boy.
I mean, for me, it's like it's people think a coach is like their AD. They just think, well, you're the coach. You just show up and the kids are just good and you win. And I know you're uncomfortable with me saying this because I can say this to you because we're friends. But you're the best coach I know. And I know some good coaches, and I have one that's a relative of mine. But you know, being a coach is a lot like being an AD. There's a lot of differences, a lot being the same. And I just think the general public doesn't quite understand. You've talked quite a bit about it today, but everybody thinks they can coach and they can't. So address that just for a second.
Yes, coaching is has always been a wonderful opportunity to show life skills. And really, at the heart of it, athletics creates um, personal success on and off the field if you do it correctly. And I think all young people are looking for someone to give them some guidance. Sorry, I got to let the dog in. He's barking.
Mm,
Um, and I really enjoyed the aspect of I I benefited from coaches who coached Trevor and Derek um, compassionately, but yet challenged them. And that's what they needed. And as a parent, um, I understood that. And I think for parents out there, um, your support of the coach, no matter the playing time that your daughter or son gets, that is critical to the success of coaching. It isn't based on favoritism. It's always, to me, it was always based on merit. And so I saw again that I was a bridge builder for these young women. And at both Salt Lake and at Weber State, that they were like my daughters. I coached them the way I I felt like would be successful in their future. And so I think the long answer to your question is basically debunking it. I don't know. I'm not sure that everybody understands the personal sacrifice and support that's required to uh, support a coach at any level.
yeah, that's well said. Let me finish with a couple of three questions. One of them's a maybe a reminiscent question, goes back probably more than 40 years, uh, back to the time when we first met, back to the time before you were married, when you played slow pitch softball for the Triarch team. Your husband was one of the assistant coaches. Uh, we had some great times. I know you went to the Class A World Series in Omaha. I was there umpiring with Terry. Just some. I was talking to Mark the other night about the time when there was one of the tournaments you were in at the Contwood Complex, and I believe that second and third, this girl gets up and hits this, and it's a tie game, bottom of the seventh. She hits this line driver, and it's to the fence. And so the girl from third easily scores. This girl's jumping up and down. Her kids, the other women come out of the dugout, and she runs right into the dugout. And this had never happened to me before. So I just kind of looked around like, well, I've got to stay here because this girl never made it to first base, and the one that caught it was your husband to be, and put the team back on the field after they kind of moped off, threw it to first. I called her out, and of course, then the whole world came unglued. But maybe just talk for a minute about some of the great times it was back 40 years ago.
Man, you just threw me under the bus. I just barely turned 50. So what, no, I'm kidding. Those were great times. And they were great times with umpires. It also helped open our eyes to the relationship that I was able to have future great relationships with the umpires I got to know at Salt Lake and the umpires I got to know at Weber State and the Big Sky Conference. And I knew they were doing their best. At times we didn't agree on calls or things, but I had to learn that. I had to learn that perspective coming from an umpire's eyes. But being true to your word, you got to play the game the right way, and they made a mistake, and that's the way it is. But we were playing pretty much every night of the week. It was fast pitch on Tuesday nights, and then we played slow pitch, women's slow pitch, and then we played co-ed slow pitch. And it was before, we had the kids essentially. And we made the greatest of friends. You, obviously, and Terry, but also all of the people that we got to play other sports with. I went on to play basketball, rec basketball with those slow pitch players, Tony Rada, huge
Hmm.
mentor to me. Rest in peace, Big Tony. But it was the time of our life where we honestly didn't have anything else. We had work and we had play, and it was
Yeah,
a great time.
perfect. Thanks for sharing that. Let me finish with these couple of questions. The first being, I always finish my podcast with this. If you've got two suggestions, usually it's for an AD, and in your case, two suggestions for a brand new coach, and they had to follow Punk's suggestions in order to be a success, what would your two suggestions be?
One would be, why do you coach? What's your why? And honestly, in hindsight, it took me a while to figure that out, and it does take most people in their first head coaching positions. What your why is? Why what you know? What's the end in mind? Um, and I think that in itself, I never had to develop that as an assistant coach because you're on board with the structure of the head coach and then of the president of the university. They're the ones at the top. And then we reflect everything that they do as a head coach, and our assistants reflect what we do. And so that's one, the why do you coach? And I think the other is your template of your culture. You've got to know what your culture is. And instead of, I don't use the word rules really. I think of them as guidelines. Your guidelines um, will dictate your success and your failure. And it is very important that you understand that your best player may not keep the guideline. And you have to be aware that that comes with a natural consequence. And are you going to speak out of two sides of your mouth and say, "Oh, this person is going to, oh, we'll forgive them this time," while all the other players are like, you're not really backing up your talk with your actions. So that culture based continued to evolve, and it doesn't happen in 1 year, and it doesn't even happen in 20 years. It keeps evolving because um, life evolves. And look at all the changes across social media and the different
Mm,
pressures of mental performance. And so you have to be flexible or be miserable, and you have to make those adjustments.
perfect. So great suggestions. Thank you so much for sharing. We'll finish with this, Punk. What question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you?
Oh boy, I think you asked a lot. I think this conversation was perfect. enough to give you a little something to jump off to. Um, I would say that the landscape question about transfer portal and
Hmm.
NIL, that there's a lot of things, as I mentioned, be flexible or be miserable, um, that are now new, and they will definitely impact the future and have of sport. And unfortunately, I feel like I think the question is there, well, how do they affect your why and your template of the culture of athletics? I began coaching to make a difference, to show people that they could do the right things and they could be coached hard and loved hard at the same time. And I learned that at home. We didn't have much. My first job, you didn't really ask about, was you asked, but I reluctantly,
Yeah.
it's McDonald's. It was McDonald's, and it was in Murray, Utah, and it was, I didn't get to play at Murray if I didn't have a job. My parents did not have enough to make that work. Anyway, how does that fast forward to today? When you're unhappy that you're not playing, or when you're seeing that the grass is greener on the other side, it's very convenient to just take that jersey off, not leave it in a better place, and you jump to where you envision it already being a better place. But be very careful, because that's not true.
Mm.
That that is still an earned position. And what did it take you to get you to change jerseys? And then what is your why as an athlete? Is it that I'm going to make $1 million? I don't know. I don't know what that would feel like, but that is the future. That these programs are paying these young people millions of dollars. So it honestly, in my opinion, should not be a collegiate sport. It's a professional sport. You are playing for money. And to me, that's not my why. My why was to teach you how to pick up your garbage in the dugout. It was to leave yourself in a better place. And instead, you just take up roots and, oh, I'm off. I'm doing it. So I would say that that's probably, in hindsight, the answer to your question is just what is the future? And I only know that Pandora's box is open,
It's
and
it's open. Yeah.
it will never be the same.
No, that is so well said. On that note, that wraps up this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Again, our special guest today has been former Weber State head softball coach and current Utah State Hall of Famer, Mary Kay Amicone. Punk, I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Hutch. It's been great. All the
For our
best.
listener, thank you. For our listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.